Okay. I wanted to go over the vocabulary for chapter 1 with you guys. These are not the Quizlet flashcards. This is on another website. I created flashcards for the chapter. The definition terms are the same, just a different look to them, that's all. So starting with psychology, the definition, the study, and really I should add the word scientific study because now psychology is a science, is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes of humans and animals. These are the goals of psychology: to describe, explain, predict, and if needed, modify or control the behavior. So these are your 4 goals of psychology. The name for the long-standing debate about relative contributions of heredity versus the environment on behavior, the nature versus nurture debate. A good example of nature versus nurture in a movie some of you have seen, Megamind. So are we a product of our genes or our experiences, our learning, how we were raised? Physiological just means, it's a synonym, a word that means the same as your body, your physical body, relating to the body. So the opposite, to use some English terms here, an antonym, a word that means the opposite of physiological, is cognitive. Cognitive refers to your mental activities. Up next, John Locke's big idea, tabula rasa, which means translate a blank slate. His belief was that we are born knowing nothing. We are born a white sheet of paper and experience writes upon it. So just more practice. John Locke said we are born a blank slate. In other words, a white sheet of paper that experience writes upon. This is called tabula rasa. All right, here's a picture. And let me see. I was going to make this full screen. Don't like it when that happens. Let's see if I can. There we go. Now I think that's better. All right, so here you have a picture from 1879, and Wilhelm Wundt, and really the W should be pronounced as a V, a V sound, Wilhelm Wundt in German, opened the first psychology laboratory. So 1879 is really like the start year for psychology to be treated as a science. Sigmund Freud, and here we're really talking about historical figures, father of psychoanalysis. And if you look at the word psychoanalysis, psycho means mind, analysis means study of. Put the two together, you have a definition for psychoanalysis, study of the mind. He used techniques like free association or free associate, dream analysis to study the unconscious mind. And we will, talk about Sigmund Freud in future chapters. Another famous psych experiment. This is the little Albert experiment. That's little Albert. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but here, yes, that's a white rat that John B. Watson and his assistant, Rosalie Rayner, he's placing the rat in front of the child. This is a classic experiment, behaviorism. So what they do, they condition or actually teach little Albert to be afraid of a white rat. So this is sometimes referred to as the infamous, which kind of like in a bad way, experiment, because some of this, is very traumatizing for little Albert. And there's been a lot of articles written about what happened to little Albert after the experiment. B.F. Skinner, another behaviorist. Sometimes I call him rat enthusiast. He used rats and pigeons in his experiments. His big idea, operant conditioning, which is a learning theory, the ideas of reinforcements, rewards, and punishments. And again, John B. Watson and the little Albert experiment. And there's a reason why there's a hand with holding a hammer in the background. I did say, it was traumatic for poor little Albert. Okay, the first woman to receive a PhD in psychology, Margaret Floyd Washburn. The first female president of the Maine Association of Psychologists, the APA, Mary Whiton Calkins, who never did receive her PhD. This is getting a little bit ahead of myself, but for chapter 2 about research methods, we talk about experiments, and you know this already from your science classes. What is an educated guess, a testable prediction called? Hypothesis. Research or science that is just meant to expand our knowledge base is called pure or basic research. Research or science used to solve real world problems, like you apply the psychology principles to solve problems. It's called applied research, or AKA applied science. The step-by-step procedures used when conducting research, scientific method. Not going to spend a lot of time on that now. You guys, I know you're familiar with scientific method. Dual means two. So this is the belief that the mind and the body are separate entities, or like they exist separately of each other. And this goes back to the ancient Greeks. Phrenology, and I don't know if in the picture, I'm kind of massaging my head here. It's the science of skull bumps. And you see in the picture, Francis Galton, who he's got he's laying hands on this head, because back then they actually believed that you could rub someone's noggin, their head, and feel the ridges and the grooves, and that would give information or tell something about like their personality or intelligence. Phrenology. Early approach in psychology developed by Edward Bradford Tishner, who was a student of Wilhelm Wundt, that used introspection, was called structuralism. And then the method they use, introspection, means to look inward. And this is very subjective. So I always use the example of a rose. So if I'm using this method under structuralism and with introspection, maybe I show you a rose and I ask you, well, how does it make you feel? What memories do you have? Okay. It's just, different people are going to say different things. So it's not scientific. And that was a big criticism of this early school of psychology, that it was not scientific. Okay. So the person is presented or shown a stimulus, say the rose, and then the psychologist would write down their responses, and they use that to help describe their state of mind. It wasn't reproducible because you're never going to get the same answers from two different people, and it wasn't scientific. So it ends up being replaced by functionalism and Gestalt psychology. Blank was an early approach that rejected introspection. Instead of asking people or subjects to describe the emotion of fear, this type of psychology studied how fear enabled people to adapt to their environment, functionalism. So the approach is called functionalism, and this is William James, who also wrote the first psychology textbook, gave the first psychology lecture at Harvard University, and is considered the father of American psychology. So this was William James's approach to studying the mind, studying behavior. It's really based more on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. They wanted to understand how behaviors, how the mind allowed an organism to adapt to survive. Okay, just more information on structuralism. And then here's the famous couch. So this is Sigmund Freud's approach. This approach emphasized the role of unconscious urges, conflicts. So, for our 7 perspectives, we use the thumb pointing back, looking back over our shoulder, because with psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic psychology, and I hate to confuse you more, but there's another name, it's called psychodynamic. So all of those mean the same. So psychoanalytic, psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, all are referring to Sigmund Freud's theory. So the memory device, your learning formula is like your thumb pointing over your shoulder, looking backwards, because what is key to understanding this theory is everything goes back to your childhood. Okay, something happened, and you bury those conflicts and those memories and feelings because they're just too painful to deal with. One of Freud's big ideas, and it's mentioned here, the Oedipus complex, and we'll talk about this when we study his theory on development. The idea that young boys, aged 7 to 11, 12, develop sexual romantic feelings for their mother and see their fathers as competition. Other big ideas, the talking cure, free association, defense mechanisms, and dream interpretation. So there's Sigmund Freud. And Gestalt psychology. The word Gestalt means as a whole. So this looks at the human mind and behavior as a whole, instead of trying to break things down into its smallest elements. Perspective that emphasizes observable behavior and in that can be measured, the behaviorist or behaviorism. And here we're really talking about Ivan Pavlov, John B. Watson, B.F. Skinner. And then in the starting 1950s, 60s, in my mind, more 1960s, 1970s, you have this perspective, and this is the one, for your ring finger. That emphasizes free will, self-esteem, and that you have choice. And basically, people are good, and they want to do good. They want to live to their 100% of their fullest potential. Humanistic psychology. And here's a picture of Maslow's hierarchy. All right, this perspective compares the mind to a computer. That the mind encodes, processes, stores information. It emphasizes studying thinking, perceiving, information processing, cognitive perspective. Remember, cognitive, your pointer finger and you tap the side of your head because you're thinking. This perspective was influenced by Charles Darwin and his theory of natural selection, evolution, evolutionary psychologist. And on your hand, I ask you to draw an imaginary 6 finger. Psychologists who employ the blank perspective study biological basis of human-animal behavior. So what is the answer? Biological or neuroscience, or AKA biomedical psychology. Don't you love it when something has more than one name? This perspective focuses on how culture and social situations affect the way people think, feel, and behave. Sociocultural perspective. And on our hand, we said, in the center of the palm, write the word sociocultural perspective. And like if you bring your hands into your chest, like you're bringing everyone together because it shows the impact of society and culture on behavior. Most popular career in psychology, 40% of psychologists, people who get degrees in psychology, go into this field, clinical psychology. Type of psychologist that applies principles of psychology to the workplace, maybe to include motivation, finding out, just how satisfied job workers are with their job, and helping to hire and fire workers. This type of psychologist is called an IO, or industrial organizational psychologist. They really try to apply psychology principles to the workplace. Now, we haven't talked about this study, but we will. Harry Harlow and his monkey study. I did say psychology study of human and animal behavior and processes. Harry Harlow did this famous study back in the 1950s. Personally, I don't care much for Harry Harlow, and in some ways he wasn't that nice of a guy. But just for now, his big idea, contact comfort, okay, that the baby monkeys would always go to or seek physical contact. And you have to look up the experiment, and we will discuss it in detail. I'm just kind of putting that out there. All right, so the 7 perspectives, there's your hand. Think about your mnemonics, your memory aids to remember those perspectives. Okay, and on this card, I just kind of wrote it out for you again so you can remember your perspectives. And today on TED Talks Tuesday, we're going to be talking about the marshmallow experiment. Okay, so this is back like 1972, Stanford